So my name is Sanja Bojanic, and I'm official host of this Center for Advanced Studies, where our fellows are joining us, and they have been joining us in person in last 5 years, and a special occasion and the pandemics and this extraordinary situation that we are going through in last few months made us think that we are actually going to work online. We will be present and absent at the same time, and we are very much grateful to our fellows who are working with us and who made us an opportunity to meet, starting with Professor Cavarero, to meet extraordinary people and to, together with them, to present their new books and works, recent works. So again, welcoming you all on behalf of the University of Rijeka. I'd like to say a few words about the Moïse Palace and our intention to transform these meetings into a Moïse Papers, a journal, for the beginning online journal, and the journal where we are going to publish firstly invited papers by our invited speakers, and then comments and work of our fellows showing together the impact that we can all have by working on urgent and important societal topics. Professor Cavarero, let me just introduce Brigitta Miloš, a colleague and a friend that is the director of the Center for Women's Studies at the University of Rijeka, who will actually say a few words about you and your work before letting Valentina introduce the seminar and your book, and then moderating the discussion with you. Brigitta, please.
Yes. I hope you can all see me and hear me, because there is a mess going on my computer. So I hope I'm somehow present to your senses. My name is Brigitta Miloš. I work at the Department of Cultural Studies at the University of Rijeka, and also I coordinate the Center for Women's Studies. And I'm mostly pleased to say a few words about our dearest guest today, about Professor Adriana Cavarero, an Italian philosopher and feminist thinker, one of the chief proponents of il pensiero della differenza sessuale in Italy. She holds the title of Professor of Political Theory at the University of Verona. She has also held visiting appointments at the University of California, Berkeley, and Santa Barbara, at the New York University and Harvard. She is widely recognized in Italy, but also Europe and the English-speaking world for her writings on feminism and theories of sexual difference, on Plato, Hannah Arendt, on theories of narration, and on a wide range of issues in political philosophy and literature. Some of her books are Nonostante Platone, In Spite of Plato, then Relating Narratives, Storytelling and Selfhood, Horrorism, very interesting book, Inclinations, A Critique of Rectitude. For this short intro, I would like to tell you a little in a way that I find most interesting. Once she said, my friends or colleagues tell me that I'm a 68er, that I'm like a 68 person, because if I understood correctly, I believe that philosophy is not just about critique or deconstructing, but also it's much about the construction of possibilities, of answers. And that would be my intro to our today's gathering on her latest title, Democrazia sorgiva, note sul pensiero politico di Hannah Arendt. Thank you, Professor Cavarero, so much for being with us.
Thank you, Brigitta. Professor Cavarero, we are having our fellows, researchers that are visiting virtually University of Rijeka, and Valentina is one of them. Valentina is our precious guest also, because we worked together on other issues, and again with Brigitta. Valentina will be your host. Firstly, she will introduce the book, and then we will let you say a few words about it as well. And again, Valentina will moderate our further discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sania. Thank you, Thea and Brigitta, for the organization of the event. Thank you to the other fellows for being part of the project. And let me join in thank you, Professor Cavarero, Adriana, for being here today and for opening our cycle of seminars and events. I'm very glad to have the chance to say some words about the book, and then to ask you, Adriana, some questions about it, so that we have a sort of dialogue. And so this book, Democrazia sorgiva, published very recently, is literally a hand-to-hand with Hannah Arendt. By closely commenting Arendt's texts, Adriana resumes and renovates within a new framework her long and enduring confrontation with Arendt. But Adriana also interrogates Arendt's work on different grounds, on new grounds. In light of the new challenges of populist politics, Adriana Cavarero engages with the Arendtian notion of democracy, namely a germinal experience of politics. I quote, a common space of mutual appearance where a plurality of unique human beings act in concert. And that's a quote from the book. Adriana Cavarero has always bluntly declared the inactuality of such an interpretation. But she also notes that this inactuality can actually be a resource in order to unconventionally question the most invoked political concepts. Adriana remarks that these are two truly opposed political imaginaries and vocabularies. So how can we properly translate the title of the book? I have been talking about it, Adriana, with Bonnie Honig, and she would translate it with spring democracy. And you tell me what you think about it. Spring democracy as something representing the idea of generation and renovation, something inaugural. In Arendt's account, it corresponds to the pure concept of politics. It entails freedom and it is diametrically opposed to any kind of government and institutional setting which entails the distinction between rulers and ruled. It is relational, and it entails relations of dependency. Subjects who are interdepending and depending on the community they belong to. Therefore, politics, as Arendt writes in the essay What is Politics, is the physical space of the in-between in which these subjects act. Such a notion of democracy was purely experienced by the ancient Greeks, but it has been forgotten in the following modern times, Arendt argues, and rediscovered as an hidden treasure only with the revolutions of the 18th century. It had been forgotten in theory, as Olivia Guaraldo notes, but not in practice, because every time a subject acts politically, which means by publicly showing his or her uniqueness, as in a theater, among a plurality of other unique actors, she experiences that kind of happiness that is collectively experienced only during events such as the revolutions. So the task of politics is not to care about each citizen's needs in a paternalistic manner. Instead, it is itself the theater in which the actors interact. Politics is not something that has to be practiced, but instead something that appears, emerges every time there is a plural interaction. Some of Adriana's examples in the book are the protests known as Arab Springs in the early 2010, the protest of the Indignados in Spain, and the protest of Gezi Park in Istanbul in 2013. Adriana agrees with Judith Butler in reading similar recognizable features in these events. Squares as settings, the theater of the uprising, horizontality among the participants, not identified leaders, and active participation in assembly, so a truly bodily experience. So these are just some words about the book, and I will try to add something later. But this is the first question for you, Adriana. So the Arendtian notion of democracy you examine in the book is spatially constructed. It is an horizontal space of mutual recognition and interaction. The image of the agora. So everybody is actively and equally engaged. On the one hand, it is an event. It happens to experience in life. And each of us can recognize such an experience as public happiness. On the other hand, you remark that the Latin felicitas, felicity, etymologically entails the female sphere of birth and generation. So how does a truly democratic experience keep together these two aspects, the happening and the female generation, the natality? Thank you.
Yes, I agree with you that the connection between happiness, to be more precise, public happiness, and felicity, let's say public felicity, the connection is this character of birth, of natality, which is, as you know, very important in the Arendtian political view, which is fundamental natality. And natality is something new and unexpected. Natality deals with the uniqueness of the newborn And natality is something that exhibits the newborn in the world, to the world, among people in the world. So this political experience of germinal democracy, of a spring democracy, which is not really something special, because we can experience this public happiness whenever we participate with other people on horizontal plane in a common space, I mean materially, physically, corporeally, in these squares, political squares mentioned also by Judith Butler. And this character of happening, which is the etymological root of happiness, something which is given, which just happen, is something that make you happy if you participate in this happening democracy, in the spring phase of a possible democracy. And you are happy, and you are in a way rediscovering birth, the event of birth, which is an event, so it's a happening, the event of birth as the felicity, as the happiness of a new beginning. I mean, by being Arendtian, I insist on this note, on these connections, on this bond between happiness, felicity, and natality and birth, something new, something also unexpected. This is why I try to underline this, what I call spring democracy, germinal democracy, is only the incipient phase of the very beginning of a possible democracy. I mean, is very temporaneous. I don't know if temporaneous is the correct, is intermitting. There is nothing granted that this original fundamental experience of democracy will develop itself as a very good representative or direct democracy in the future. So it is, it belongs to the category of really of happening, of something which is given and which is very affirmative and very promising. What I wanted to stress in this idea I borrowed by Arendt, what I wanted to stress is that we are in the field of what is affirmative, generative, what deals with reciprocal interaction, and the consciousness, the awareness of belonging to something new, something proactive and creative. And this, and something I want to underline, it's very emotional, because happiness, it is an emotion, is a public happiness, is a political emotion, while on the opposite, if we look at the tradition of the political thought, what is put in the center of politics, of what is politics, this famous question, are negative emotion, like, for example, the impulse to violence, the effervescence of fight, of something very negative, with all the following negative diets, like for Carl Schmitt, friend, enemy, something always dealing with opposition, with collision. If politics had at its very, very source, very, very beginning, necessary engagement with fight, with opposition and fight. On the contrary, I think that we can experience the fundamental source of politics and spring democracy, something which deals with the very beginning, with initium, they would say in Latin. And this is not characterized by the emotion of fight and fright, of the emotion of opposition, of wrath, but on the contrary, it is characterized by this discovering of a public happiness, of a public joy, or a public pleasure, to be together and interact in a common shared space, materially, physically, bodily. This is what makes my book very strange in this difficult time, because in our time, in the pandemic time, we are experiencing what is in the center is the distance, the necessary distance between bodies. We cannot congregate. You know, you mentioned assembly, and assembly, a congregation of bodies which remain plural, but which are together, close, face to face. And now what is necessary for our safety is a relation with the other, which consists in separation. I am in relation with other bodies, with other persons I meet when I go in the street, when I go to the supermarket, when I have a walk. The relation with many bodies, bodies that I can give a contagion to them. So we are experiencing a sort of relationship which consists in separation. What I'm speaking about when I mention spring democracy is a situation which consists in aggregation. So we are in a paradoxical time, but in my opinion, just because we are in a situation of a separation, we, at least we long for democracy. We have a sort of nostalgia for democracy, for spring democracy, for aggregation and congregation. We remember and we long for. So this is also a particular time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adriana. And this separation is also caring, because as we are separated now, there is also a lot of caring and protection towards the others. So this is the paradoxical situation. Sanya has a question for you. Sanya?
Thank you very much. It was inspiring above all. And maybe the way I would like to engage in discussion goes very quickly through Gustave Flaubert and his the Simple Heart story, Trois Contes. And you know very well the main character, her name is Félicité. So she is Felicity. But I'm not going to develop it further. What I wanted to now point out is that the title of the story is The Simple Heart, which means that if there is a Félicité, it should be a naive, open, absolutely open space for everything to come in. And if I understood you well, your felicity and the felicity that you are introducing is also having this level of opening naivety, which is helping a democracy to spring. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you. In the book, I mention Roland Barthes and Elias Canetti. I mentioned them about one special version or expression of this happiness, of this felicity, which is the vocal expression. This, I'm very interested in the vocal aspect of human relationship. And when you are in these squares, in these interactive squares, in this congregation, assembly, there is the importance of the vocal expression, which consists not only in words and conversation, but also in songs. And in any case, given that we are in presence not of a mass, of a crowd, but of a plurality, of interactive plurality, I invented this neologism for the voice of plurality, which I called pluriphony. Anyway, your question is connected with the fact that through Canetti, some text of Canetti, some text of Roland Barthes, I try to focus on the fact that there is in this experience of spring democracy, something dealing with infancy, something dealing with the joy and the happiness and the open heart of infancy. This openness to what we call, we don't know. And this interest in the other, this, let's say, joy and love for the world, love for the world, for the human world. So I think that when we insist on happiness, political happiness, public happiness, as an experience of natality, we also insist on an experience typical of children, and we also insist on openness, something which really consists in sort of pure experience of openness, a pure experience of hope in the future, confidence in the present and hope in the future. Something, as you said, a bit naive, in my opinion, also very utopian, because it is completely positive, completely generative, completely creative, something utopian. But I think that we need a bit of utopia. We need, I think that we need an imaginary of hope, a political imaginary of hope, because we cannot just repeat this description of the field of politics as a field of violence, of domination, of exploitment, and so on. So I think that the big political thinkers had a vein of utopia. And our experience of the political squares taste this utopia, which is naive, open. We could say pure, any way positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana, for your answer. And I wanted to ask you another question, and then I will leave the word to the other fellows, or to Brigitta, or to anyone who has questions. So your work has been dialoguing among many other philosophers with two feminist theorists and political theorists very well known in the United States, Judith Butler and Bonnie Honig. So in the book, you discuss Butler's critical reading of Arendt in her text, Notes Towards a Performative Theory of Assembly. So Butler is somehow enraged with Arendt, as you tell, because Arendt, while celebrating the ancient Greek polis as an ideal model in which the citizen experience truly public happiness, somehow bans the body's needs and the sphere of the work as something apolitical. Could you tell us something more about Butler's critique? And then my question is, then why Butler still chooses to refer to an Arendtian vocabulary in order to describe the performative exercise of politics, these assemblies and these uprisings in the squares that you've been also mentioning?
Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, I think that Judith Butler is right in criticizing Arendt because this part of Arendt political thought, this distinction between the sphere of the private, dealing with the bodies and the work and for care, the bodily existence, the bodily life, and the sphere, the public sphere, which instead deals with actual interaction, and it is the only one profoundly human, the maximum of the human experience. This distinction is very, very problematic, and Arendt has been very criticized for this distinction. It would be a very long discourse, but the problem is present. There is a problem. Of course, for Butler, this is unacceptable because one of her main point, of Butler's main point, is that the political square is always a location, the site for taking care of bodies, for taking care of all the bodily needs. So as you underlined, to look at Arendt in order to describe a political square characterized by bodily needs and bodily cares doesn't work. But it is very interesting, your second question, the second part of your question. Arendt, for Butler, for me, for many political thinkers, for Bonnie Honig too, is unrenounceable, because Arendt is the one to define politics as a space of appearance. This is very important. The space, as I mean, a material space, a physical space, actual space of appearance, of this impulse to appear to each other, reciprocal appearance of persons who are embodied uniqueness in a plurality. This is unrenounceable for thinkers who want to insist on the performative aspect of politics, of interaction as something performative, something material and dealing with a shared space and a physical interaction. So I think that this is the motive, the reason why Arendt is unrenounceable. And also because Arendt, as I tried to say before, insists on this generative power of politics. And also this is unrenounceable. And last but not least, because according to Arendt, as you know, where there is political power, there is not violence. This is the big separation of political power from violence. And this is very important for many political thinkers who look for sort of pacifist and conception of political action. I think this is the very important distinction between Arendt and the dominant political tradition. The dominant political tradition declares that violence and power are inseparable. Arendt, on the contrary, says that they cannot coexist. They not coexist. That here, there, where there is violence, power, political power is absent. And so I think this is very important for Judith Butler too, and for Bonnie Honig too.
Thank you very much for answering. Does anyone have questions? Does any of the fellows want to open the discussion? Federica, do you want to say something?
I don't hear.
Can you hear me?
Okay, yes.
Thank you, Professor Cavarero, for being here with us. And thank you again, Valentina, for this opportunity. I'm truly honored. I have just two questions, if it's possible. If I understood correctly, a key feature of Hannah Arendt's concept of politics is the spatial dimension, both as a physical space, but also as a relational space.
Yes.
However, as you pointed out, politics consists in the interaction of a physical plurality, but it does not require a defined territory. In principle, it can happen in any place and in any time. In this regard, today, in the age of social network and of the overexposure of the self as a single isolated subject at the expense of the social relation, how does the concept of exposition and public share public space change? Can technology provide any resources in order to promote what you have called spring democracy, or we still need a physical space of interaction? And this is the first question. And the second, maybe I'm just wrong, but it seems to me that there is a strong reference to Arendt's philosophy in Nancy's work, especially in regard to the concept of exposition, or the being with as the co-appearance of together with one another. So maybe I'm just wrong, but I'd like to hear your opinion about this if it's possible. Thank you again.
Thank you. You are not wrong at all. In Jean-Luc Nancy, there is a cryptic reference to Arendt. I mean, this is typical of some male academy, contemporary academy. They use Arendt, but they don't quote Arendt. So this, you are not wrong, you are completely right. She is fundamental for a big section of political contemporary thought in Europe and in America. But this is this vice of the male academics, the male intellectuals, to pretend to be the inventor of some categories. So you are right. As to the first question, the first question is extremely interesting because according to Arendt, and in my opinion as well, what we call real politics, the pure experience of politics, or if you want, spring democracy, germinal democracy, deals with the relational, physical, corporeal participation, sharing a physical space. The internet, the connection we are in this moment is a form of being together, but bodily distancing. We are separated. We are exposed to each other, but we are separated. And literally we are remote. We are remote. We are somewhere not together. We are, and this could be useful, could be helpful, especially in this time where the bodily relation is prohibited, or it consists, we are in a distanciation, the distance of care, distancing of care, and it has been very helpful and useful, very important, also during the Arab Springs, or the more recent phenomena of political square. In Italy as well, we had, before the pandemic, in November, December, we had this phenomenon of le piazze delle sardine, the squares of sardines, where the social and the digital connections was very important for organizing, for communicating, for coordinating. But it is difficult to translate a politics of participation, of bodily participation, into a politics of digital connection. I think that digital connection is very important and helpful, but I don't think that in this moment we are emotionally experiencing public happiness. Sometimes having seminars with other people in a common space, a physical space, I experienced public happiness, where the reaction, the relationships are real, where you see the face of the other, and you can also interact plurally in a sort of confusion, because the spring democracy is not just a scene, a scenario on which you have a perfect, distinctive and clear performance. There is an element of confusion, an element of not crystal clear discourses. On the opposite, when you are connected with the internet, like now we are doing, we have to follow some rules for not overlapping the voices. I mean, it could be collateral and helpful, but I don't think that it is the same emotionally and physically the same as a relational shared physical space.
Yeah, and that's meaningful also with your experience with the feminist movement, and also with recent feminist squares in Verona. But I wanted to give Brigitta Milos the word if you want to say something.
Yes, thank you, Valentina. It's not really a question. It's more like a thought that it just came into my mind while I was listening to your answers to your speak. I was thinking about the fact this phrase, let's say, a physical space. In a way, or if I understand the physics correctly, this also is a physical space. We are not to be outside the physical space. So it is not, somehow it seems to me that it is not the quality in a way of physical space that we are talking about, because it always is as it is. It's just the style of this space that we may or may not negotiate with, or adapt ourselves to, or discharge it as too sterile, too narrowing, or some other as more ours to feel, more ours to feel comfortable within that space. It somehow reminded me to what Elizabeth Gross, when she critiqued, in a way, Butler says, theory of materiality of the body. She said, for Butler, it is more important the process than the matter itself. So maybe this is the cause for us to feel somehow alienated in this sort of communication. But the materiality is basically always the same in a way, at least in physical sense. And then for not being able to experience voice overlapping, I know you are much you are much engaged in voicing or vocality, but then I'm witnessing right now, at the same time as I speak, or as I listen to you speak, or any other person present here, I can parallelly see the chat room going on very vividly. Somehow it's up to me, maybe, to make a theater out of it, or to voice it. And there are some other, just some other forms of I can't say voicing, but overlapping, or feeling connected, or inclined to, in a way. So it's just really a thought. It's not a question. I don't know even how to formulate these thoughts of mine as a question, but it's just something that I felt I wanted to share with all of us, in a way.
Yeah, this is a big question. I try to answer by quoting Hannah Arendt, who says that, she's quoting Thucydides, wherever you go, you will be a polis. I mean, this political space is everywhere. It is intermittent and can open up, can happen everywhere. and in different modality. I mean, the political physical space could be a square, but could be also a room. I mean, I come from a feminist experience. I know the participation in demonstration on square, but I know also the consciousness arising discussion in a room with other feminists, with other women. So what you mentioned as this, you said inclination for relationality. Inclination for relationality. I mean, this is very important to be open to relationality, because relationality can happen if you participate in a demonstration on the street or in a square, could happen, but you have to discover in yourself. I mean, anyway, it is necessary to have an inclination for relationality, to have a need for the others. So in my opinion, I know I'm not answering to your complex question, but in my opinion, there is the importance of this need for the others, this need for relationality, for guessing that what is ontologically human is plural and relational. And if you have this need for relationality, you can find a form of relationality everywhere. But of course, it is not, you know very well this, it is not an individual initiative. Something must happen together. The others are necessary. So politics is not something you can open by your initiative in isolation. A space is needed. Could be a digital space, I don't know that. I think that we need a material space. But a space, what is common, what is spatially common is needed. So politics is the very situation which doesn't exist without the plurality of others. I think to be very Arendtian in saying that.
Thank you very much, Adriana. So I see that there are other questions. So Federica Merenda, please.
Yes, thank you very much. And I thank the organizers because I'm a PhD student at the University at Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna in Pisa, so I'm a host here, and I thank you very much for letting me in. And I have a question that is related to the points that you just touched. You talked about we talked about digital technologies as mediation between and among human beings. An aspect that I'm very worried about, that there is already talking about in the academic scholarship about in legal theory and in political philosophy, and this is the issue of artificial intelligence, meaning technologies that do not just mediate between and among human beings, but that can substitute human beings. And what I'm very much concerned of, but I should say worried about, is the fact that in the academic debates that I read about that, because I'm doing my PhD thesis on that, I see a scarce problematization precisely of these aspects of the Arendtian politics that you just mentioned, that is the generative aspects of politics and politics as interaction of unique beings, which I think are precisely the aspects that would lack in a world where not only people are relationships among human beings are mediated by digital technologies, but in which human beings are substituted by artificial intelligence. And I really see that there is, that is not very much problematized. I don't know whether that's a word in English, I'm sorry. Especially from those who have a legal background. So this question is both about your impressions on this topic, on the substitution of human beings by artificial intelligence, and by the reactions that you see in the academics about that, connected with the issues that you raised from now. Thank you.
Yes, this is a new, but also an old problem, the problem of the automaton, which substitute the human. And you correctly said the problem, the profile of the automaton is repetition. So in the behavior of the automaton, there is no possibility of invention of the new, if not the new is programmed into the automaton. On the contrary, what Arendt means for politics, for the ontologically human, she's very strong on that. Politics is the human for excellence. And what she finds in the field of politics is just innovation, invention, initiative, the unpredictable. The automaton is in the field, in the sphere of the predictable. Politics in the real sphere of the unpredictable. So it's very difficult not to insist on this opposition. If we go to the science fiction, if we go to the field of science fiction, in science fiction, we have, excuse me, we have many presentations of this kind of problem. That is also an emotional problem, because as a human, we are sorry for the automaton. We imagine that the automatons wants to be human, want to transform itself into human. Why? Because to be transformed into human means to accept our vulnerability, our fragility, our connection to the unpredictable, our capacity of invention, our capacity for using Arendt of beginning, because we are beginners. The automaton is not a beginner. So there is really a big collision among the two scenarios. And I think that in the academic area, in the academic fields, the automaton, the artificial intelligence and the robots are considered among an economical framework. It's very interesting for economy, very interesting for, you know, for question of the social and economical programs. Let's say for this new capitalism of a capitalism without workers, without human workers. But it is unconceivable from an Arendtian point of view. If not, you put the robots, the automaton, in the area of the help at home.
Thank you. And now I think that Alessandra has a question. Alessandra is one of our fellows.
First of all, thank you to Professor Cavarero and Valentina, of course, and Tanya and all the CAS team for making it possible. And I have two questions, if I may. The first one is, you define, according to Hannah Arendt, that the political scene is the scene of the appearance or the public space of appearance. So politics is this common space of mutual appearance and this presentation or exhibition, and the metaphor or theater is very much present in your work, and it is deeply related to our body and the body issue between Arendt and Judith Butler. And I think that what is at stake is exactly the role of our politics. The question is, should we think politics as an instrument to fix, if I may say, the world and the bodies, or an activity that aims to transcend culturally and symbolically the physiological limits of mankind? In other words, there is still a politics, which is not a biopolitics. And the second one is that given an intersubjective structure of action, but also a phenomenal or phenomenological nature of politics, if it is possible, according to you, to understand politics in its expressive function. Your pages about the expression of voice are so evocative. So in order to handle the relationship between individual choices and collective action, for example, what I read in it an aesthetic paradigm which gravitates around the concept of visibility, and according to me seems to fit also to the phenomenon of digital populism. What do you think? Thank you.
Yes, by being Arendtian, I would claim that politics cannot be biopolitics, because biopolitics is the negation of politics. I mean, the question that the bodies are active, are present, and the materiality of the space we share bodily, doesn't mean that the main goal or aim of politics is taking care of life and taking care of the bodies. So I understand that this recent, from Foucault on, this recent interest also among Italian intellectuals for the issue of biopolitics. But in my opinion, there is an exaggeration in this insisting that contemporary politics everywhere is transforming itself in biopolitics. Of course, in our times of contagion, there is a necessity for biopolitics, a necessity of medical instruction for being safe, for overcoming the illness and the virus. But if I speak from an Arendtian perspective, the quintessential politics consists on something dealing with action and with invention and with problems which are not profoundly connected with the mere life, with the mere experience of the body. So I don't know if this was the direction of your questions, but in my opinion, there is sort of refrain of interpreting politics, contemporary politics, as something with a inendurable, I'm tired, something which has an inclination for the male life, for controlling male life, for biopolitics. In my opinion, this is an exaggeration. Also, the Arendt contagion, this is an exaggeration. And for example, I can make an example. In one recent text by Giorgio Agamben, he was complaining of these mass graves we had in Bergamo, in some Italian towns, cities. And he said, this is barbarian, because in the cultural tradition, we need funerals, we need participation. And this is true. This is true, but the absence of funerals is not barbarian. The absence of funeral is inscribed in the history of Europe, I mean in the history of the West, which is the only history I know, in the history of West. Whenever there was a contagion, this is notorious also for the ancient Greece, for Athens. The plague was in ancient Athens, the plague was in medieval age. We had the famous Spagnola. I mean, just because we have many events in history, because history is unpredictable. And the contagion, the possibility of the contagion is one of these events. So this is not central to politics. Politics consists in something dealing with act and words, and if you want, with the voice. So something which is physical, because also the voice is physical. Something which is physical, like the words, because you cannot utter words if you don't have a functioning brain. I mean, this is logical. But there is something transcendent. Politics is, I'm not sure of this, but I would say politics is rooted in the body, in the presence of plural, unique bodies. But politics deal, like natality, with the production of the new. I mean the transcendence of the condition of natality, for example. Not transcendence in the sense that there is some God or some eternal truths or something which we can reach forever, but something that transcends the real physical situation, like the newborn does, because the newborn is completely embodied, but the newborn is her or his unpredictable stories in the life which will come for him or for her.
Thank you. And I think that this is particularly meaningful when you speak about vocality, especially in the second part of the book, which is definitely your topic, a topic that has accompanied your work probably for the whole time, and that recurs. And this is definitely also a way I think to bring the Arendtian argument back to the bodily experience of the voice and of the square, of a physicality which is not the rational logos, rational masculine logos, but is an embodied physicality. Another of the fellows, Guglielmo, has a question.
Yes, well, thanks. Thank you, Professor Cavarero, and thanks, Valentina. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, thank you for, well, being here in this way, and Valentina to organize this whole thing. And I particularly appreciate the continuity in the background between your bookshelf and Valentina's one. I actually think you are together and you are going to have lunch after the seminar. So it's really inspiring. I'd like to ask you a question about, well, drawing a line between infancy, being naive, confusion, all these, let's say, early steps of spring democracy, and, well, plain incompetence or bad politics. Because if we have to sort of see the history, recent history of Italy, we have some sort of, well, parties or movement that sent law proposal to Schifani back in the days, and well, now they are doing something, and it seems that they can sort of try to build the political narration out of what you said, saying they are the real representation of spring democracy, and I don't want this to happen, and I would like to, well, know how to fight back these misappropriations of your ideas if this should happen directly by the author of the ideas.
Yeah, this also is a very old question posed by Plato, that there is this danger in democracy to have incompetence for, if it is something that happens that regards a plurality of people, and but where is the politiche techne or the politiche episteme, the competence for the polis, for, and this gives me the occasion, the opportunity to clarify a central point. When I speak of spring democracy or participative democracy, I speak of an initial phase, a phase which is a promising phase of democracy, but could also be abandoned. I mean, there is no competence needed in this initial phase, which is the participation of a leaderless plurality in a common space, and which consists basically, this is me more than Arendt, basically in an emotion. It is a political emotion, the possibility of political emotion. The question is how we can translate or turn this political emotion into a system of government good for adequate for the common good. But there is a transition. I mean, the competence is required in representative democracy. Competence is required in system of rule, which is inevitable if we have this form of government, of a regime called democracy, representative democracy, in a big country with millions of inhabitants and big territory, big lands. But this belongs to the sphere of system of government and system of domination, system of rule that can be bad, good, a bit bad, a bit good, can be terrible, totalitarian, can be, you know. And this second area, the area of system of governments, is the area when we correctly can put the question of competence, not in this very initial, incipient phase of emotional spring democracy. On the other hand, as you know very well, also the more refined and sophisticated system for electing a competent person for ruling over the other, like in the United States, has made elected a person like Trump, which is not exactly the model for political competence. But my main focus is in the phenomenology of political emotions, in order to define what could be the very core of what we call generally democracy.
Thank you, Adriana, for the detailed answer. It's very stimulating, but it's also very much concerning, this topic. So now Irene Dal Poz has a question. She is a PhD candidate at Warwick University and at Monash University. So welcome.
Yes, thank you very much, first of all, for organizing this. This is really great.
And Warwick in England, yes.
Yes.
I've been for a visiting professor for a semester many years ago.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful. Oh.
It's so sun today, so it's nice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, for organizing this event today. It's really great. Actually, my question relates to what you were mentioning by the end now. So the idea of emotion and politics of emotion, if you want. I really liked what you said about hope before. And of course, you were referring to Carl Schmitt, so friend-enemy dynamic. And yeah, rethinking a politics of emotion based on hope. But I was wondering whether in Arendt, or in your thoughts in other places, sources, you find tools also to think struggle, particularly if we define politics as acting together in concert in a space of appearance. Well, we all know that there are some bodies that do not have visibility. I cannot speak somehow. That's also something that Butler, Spivak talked about. So if we don't want to follow Schmitt, and also if we want to think about politics of hope, can we still preserve a space for struggle and, if you want, resistance, and claiming visibility for bodies that did not have that space before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. Arendt is very interesting because she doesn't conceive politics in terms of struggle, as you know. She doesn't conceive a tool. Also, if she conceives politics in terms of resistance, and the location of the resistance and the location of people who also resist, for example, the banality of evil. Resist to orders that are inconceivable, that are unacceptable. So in Arendt, this is the question I can put to you, because it is an interesting question, very difficult to resolve. In Arendt, we have a definition of the political which is very connected with a definition of the moral and there is something that doesn't work.
Okay, now we can hear you.
Something that doesn't work in the connection.
Can you hear us, Adriana?
I hear you, yes. But
okay.
Before it was big mess.
There was a background rumor, so now it's open.
So I don't remember what I was saying, but I was insisting on the fact that there is an interconnection between an ethical approach and a political approach, an ontological approach in Arendt. The same problem you can have with Levinas. In Levinas, it is prevailing the ethical aspect. On the other hand, the main political tradition, the one from Machiavelli, Hobbes, Schmitt, and so on, the so-called realistic tradition, insists on the founding role of struggle. I want to insist on this. There's not only that politics could deal or could interfere with struggle, but we have in the main political tradition the idea that struggle has a founding role of politics, that there is no politics without struggle, that politics consists in struggle. This is completely absent in Arendt. Arendt, when she conceived in a sort of struggle, she conceived it in terms of resistance, sort also of passive resistance, but resistance.
This is very important. I'd like to add something, if it's possible, maybe in connection to Irene's question, and also to give Adriana some time to get some rest after the lot of questions. So what among the things that I really appreciated of the book, there is, as I said, this part on vocality and on voices. It made me think of Tina Kamp's book, Listening to Images, that engages with this archive of dismissed photographs of Black people who face the diaspora. In the book, Kamp intertwines the vocal aspect of mourning and lamentation for a loss. This is the case of Black people shot dead, as we sadly know that it frequently happens in the United States. That is the situation she was describing. So she was intertwining this vocal aspect of the mourning and the visual aspect of these images, these photographs, saying briefly, there is so much behind those photographs that is hidden, and that's a hidden story. But the vocality, like some audio phonetical sounds recorded of people lamenting the grief and the loss, will bring those stories back. And I found a lot of this in when you were talking about not just an individual voice, but as the voice of the plurality, not just the voice of the mass, but instead the voice of the plurality. I think that this is a very, very original and relevant topic.
Yes, I noticed it just now in our period of lockdown, and when we go outside and walk in the street, and you can meet the people, and the people have the masks, the facial masks. And so there is sort of impossibility of the visual contact because you don't see the face, so there is no face to face. You see the eyes, but not the expression of the face. You don't understand if the person you are meeting, if she is smiling or she is angry. You don't understand because the masks are very big. You cannot touch the other person because if you touch the other person, you transmit the contagion. But you can have a physical relationship with the other person by speaking with the voice, because the voice is unique and you recognize the other person. I recognize the other person because of the voice. Because we don't have gone to the hairdresser, so also our hair are very different. You cannot recognize the people there. And when they say hello, I say, oh, it is you. So I mean, the voice is an important element in analyzing the phenomenology of human relationships. A very important element. The voice can have different tones, different styles, and I tried to detect, to investigate on the particular tone and style of spring democracy by analyzing it vocally. So one of the typical tone and style of mass fascist demonstrations is the unison shout or song accompanied by a march, accompanied by gesture. And that is a scenario in which plurality disappears. Disappears because what you see is a monolith of the mass with one and a single voice, into which the uniqueness of very voice disappears. On the other hand, I think that there is a song of democracy, that democracy has a song, and it is a song made up of a plurality of voices, which doesn't sing in unison, but doesn't produce a cacophony, doesn't produce an harmony. They produce what I call, because I don't have a new name, pluriphony. Something you can hear when you participate in political squares or in demonstration. And I would say that the tone of this song, of this democratic song, the tone is not a violent tone, it's not a tone of revenge, of insurrection, is a tone of joy in sharing a common space peacefully and interacting. For example, you, Valentina, mentioned Bonnie Honig. When Bonnie Honig, at the beginning of the contagion in Italy, that you could see everywhere on the internet, on YouTube, Italian people going on the balcony and singing together, which was, and which is a bit folkloristic, for encouraging themselves, like we will survive and we sing. This was one of the aspects, but Bonnie Honig, by observing this from America, from the United States, she was very cute, and she suggested that this was sort of serenade to democracy. What does it mean to serenade to democracy? I interpreted it in terms of it was a nostalgia for democracy and a hope for democracy. Something lost because you couldn't, I mean democracy, I mean spring democracy. Something you have lost because you couldn't congregate, no? You couldn't go to the square, congregate, enjoy public happiness, but something which is in the future, because this experience of spring democracy that you can recognize, because also if you never had this experience, whenever you have for the first time this experience, it appears familiar, which is a strange phenomenon. Also, John Adams speaks about that. You feel something new but familiar, something unexpected but familiar. And so in my opinion, there is a sort of familiarity also in the hope for the coming back of the public square and of the experience of democracy. I know this is a bit naive and this is a bit utopian, but I want to insist on a scenario which is naive and utopian. Because if we remain to the level which is very successful, or critics skepticism and opposition and lack of any hope, we are doing something very dangerous in an era of populism. Before, I didn't answer to this question. It was mentioned the question of populism, of digital populism. We have digital populism, we are square populism, and this is very dangerous. For Arendtian reason, if you read The Origins of Totalitarianism, you understand why it is very dangerous, but everybody of us know it. And so we need a political imaginary, a positive political imaginary. We need it also for the young, for the new generations, because the new generations don't have a political experience because they are younger, they are new, they are younger, and they must be told stories, narratives that are positive narratives, narratives insisting of interacting and initiative and insisting on hope, because otherwise it is very dangerous, just for the West now. Yes, I'm very tired. So I beg your pardon for my English.
No, we thank you a lot. I just wanted to briefly follow up, because I think that what you just said is really important. And two examples that you mentioned in the book, the Women's March and the March of Our Lives in 2017, respectively, and 2018 in the US. So I participated in these events, but I was in the small state of Rhode Island. Still, the feeling was precisely the one you were describing, not just being part of something against something else, against Trump's machism and violence, or against the gun massive spread in the United States, but precisely it was the affirmation of visibility. Like, we are here, we are endangering ourselves, our bodies, to appear, to be present, and that was so much. Yeah, so I just think that this is also an aspect that makes this desire for democracy meaningful, because you just don't need to make you just don't need to have an enemy, but you want to change systematically the way of being engaged into politics.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, Sanya, if you think that we can conclude here the meeting, thanking Adriana so much for your inspiring words.
Thank you, Valentina, firstly, for making an effort to keep us so long. And also, of course, Adriana, for your precious words and hope that you are spreading with your Spring Democracy, and of course, always in line with the Arendtian thought. It is extremely important to make a difference between biopolitics all over, especially discourses on biopolitics all over public spaces and private spaces, and what has been meant as political, the meaning of the political in Arendtian sense. We do hope to have you also at Tres, in Moïse Palace, a beautiful Renaissance palace, where we meant to gather together and work on similar topics. So the invitation is open as for everyone else. I wish to thank you all for being present, for being with us. Our seminar will be published, and thank you for sharing it. This is the way to share ideas of hope and Spring Democracy. Thank you to all, and have a nice day.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you,
Adriana. Goodbye.
And see you soon, bodily, physically. See you soon, physically.
Exactly.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Ciao.